Hey, how's everyone doing today? This is Pastor Mike, and this is my good man.
It's Nick over here, and we're going to be doing the week of November 15th, Lectionary 33.
Excellent. Stumbling toward the Eschaton. The text that we're looking at, and maybe this preface would be good. We are people that the text that we use follows something called a liturgical calendar, where there's a lectionary, where there's readings that they go in an order. You know what I mean? Baby Jesus is born. That's how things begin and life is born, yada, yada. We go through that. And we're actually getting close to wrapping up the year. As that happens, some of the texts change and they go toward, less the wrapping up of the year, but the wrapping up of all things.
Yeah, we go into heavy metal zone in the Bible.
Yes, heavy metal zone, affectionately sometimes called, the apocalypse. The book of Revelation has those sorts of things. It can sound pretty metal, especially Daniel's version of it. Yeah. But, for some people that's kind of freaky. But it's not necessarily bad per se, because even as our name, right?
Yeah.
So much toward the Eschaton, the culmination of all things.
Exactly.
The end of things is going to be good, because the good Lord knows what he's doing, not his first rodeo.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great to see Jesus on a bull. But
No, that'd be awesome.
But just when I take my idioms and examine them for a second.
Now I'm thinking about the apocalypse, and I'm thinking of your European Jesus. Just be like, but alas.
Yes. But alas, it's all over again. Oh, yes. But the Mark text we have is coming from 13, and it's a wild one, because Jesus is outside the temple, and his disciples look at him and say, "Teacher, what large stones and what large buildings?" Then Jesus asked him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone left here upon another. All will be thrown down." So even the temple, the center of worship, Jesus telling them is going to get wrecked, like the discotheque. When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, as I continue, opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign that all these things are about to be accomplished?" Then Jesus began to say to them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' but they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place. But the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs." I love it because in worship we say, "Thanks be to God," after some of the many readings. It's like, thanks for wars and what?
Yeah. It's pretty funny because keep in mind that the Bible is crazy old.
Yeah.
And that this still comes true today, like how we're still having wars every less than 50 years, and it's just crazy how we're humanity's just in this cycle.
Well, what is the statistic? Not to get too off tangent. I can never remember it well, but it's something around there was only a space in history of 200 years where there haven't been wars. A really ridiculously small number, and we're talking not just AD. 2,000 years. But even before that, some historians have been running the numbers, and it's something 200 odd years where there was peace. Mm-hmm. And that's it across the face of the globe. So even as Christ says it, it's that reminder that there is often these upheavals, which is standard, like you're saying.
Yeah. And plus too, I'm not a guy that's up for conflict. And so to me, if it's let's say, with just countries in trouble, we're we'll help you. And they're nah, it's all right, we'll handle this. I kind of feel like we should put this bag down at that point. But being America, we're the police of the world. We need to.
Well, and it's funny because it's that struggle. It's interesting. International politics, if we're going to get into it, is hard. Because if we look through history, for periods of time, there was often this sense that somebody had to kind of be the lead on policing. For us, it was like Britain. If you look at, for good or for ill, and I don't know of a better term, colonial period,
mm-hmm.
They ruled the high seas. That was their bag. They were kind of the ones enforcing everything.
Yeah.
Now it's us. You know what I mean? Before, even then, was it Spain? The Holy Roman Empire. They were trying to run the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
Is that good? Is that bad? What's the ramifications for getting involved? What's not? Do you choose not to get involved because there will always be wars?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, because I can't remember what president it was. It was during World War II. I am terrible with names, but they did the isolation method of we're not going to put our nose into World War II because it's not affecting us directly.
Yep.
And then Pearl Harbor happened, and then we're like, all right, you just woken up the sleeping giant, and then
Yes.
and then that's when we actually entered the war, and then it ended. And not to bring in some real statistics here, but World War II ended 3 days after Chuck Norris was born. Coincidence? I think not.
Nice Chuck Norris reference in on that. Yeah, I mean, especially after, and it was no surprise, especially after World War One, the isolationist, because man, I mean, the death tolls from World War One were off the chart. Mm-hmm. Horrible war.
Because with trench foot and that stuff going around, that's
trench warfare was just bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just bad, and it's this, and I mean, it's even as what he's talking about here. There'll be wars, and you look throughout history, all these wars, and the struggles with it, and it's that issue that even James and John and Peter, they want to know what's going on. When are we going to be done with all these things? And it's that not yet, which is kind of rough, I think. I think many people want to be done with those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the text is a hard one. And I mean, part of the struggle is always, what do you do with a hard text?
Mm-hmm. And plus, it's the struggle with all of these wars happening so often. Is you look at the news, they're like, oh, insert country and declared war on insert country, and you're like, oh, okay, and then you flip the channel. That's not okay to have that. Same with all of the murders and the school shootings that are going around. It's like school gets shot up, and you're like, oh, okay, people are becoming desensitized to how bad that stuff is.
Yes, the complacency with the struggles in our world are rough. I mean, Syria was bad. I mean, even just the what was it, the British airliner that got bombed.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's an interesting time. But again, you look at these things, when wasn't there an interesting time to be alive? Mm-hmm. And so what do you make of it? I mean, what do we do with this warning? And I think the great thing to think about in it is that last line, but this is but the beginning of the birth pangs. I think that is a good lens to do these things. Because that's always the question of a difficult text. I mean, there's hard text, there's easy text. Yeah. You know what I mean? God loved the world. That's an easy text. You know what I mean? Let's parse that out. By the world, do we mean only people like me? No, let's throw that one pretty broad.
Yeah, that's the one we save for the last question.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we ran out of time.
Oh, God loves the world. Really? You mean the world? Like the actual earth and not the people? No. Guys, come on. Let's not overdo it. But some of them, I think you got to bring that lens to, what do we take away from this? And I like the birth pangs lens. Because I think as we handle these things, what it does is that we come through it and we're able to then use it maybe hopefully for good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's often the hope, is that if we can, war is not good, but if good can come after it and out of it. I mean, you even just had Veterans Day. We appreciate our veterans, but, whether it's naive or not, I'd rather not have to send anybody to war ever again.
Exactly. Well, with, to me, as I said, I'm a not war guy.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War, which was, to me, it's one of those things that I feel bad for saying, and then, it's kind of but it's true, is, our involvement really didn't have any, true impact to the war, because we were kind of here's a treaty between North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and then we stepped out, and then it was, right away, they invaded and took over, and it was kind of and we spent countless lives fighting that war, and at the end of the day, it's just kind of, and that brings back my thing of, if a country doesn't ask for help, why try and help them,
It's hard. I mean, it is hard with all those things, You go in, do you sit out World War II? Do you go in?
Yeah.
Do you sit out Korea? Do you go in? Do you sit out World War I? Do you go in? Should we have done more to help the Yazidis? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The possible...
with the Syrian refugee stuff, too, that, how the countries are no, you can't come in here, stop bringing, all of these people, and you're well, that's inhumane. But then, if, let's say, in a different situation, something's happening in Mexico, and everyone's trying to get into America, and then you're it's a completely different scenario, where you're no, we can't take care of any more people, and it's just
And that's the struggle, too, because you ought do something to take care of people, But then there reaches the possible limit of what happens if you have too many people that you need to care for, that you can't care for them. You know what I mean? Yes, refugees should be taken care of, but is it the concept of can you overfunction? And that's maybe one of those things where you do more than you should. Because you should do good, but how much is too much that it ceases to be good? Man, and wow, that's all out of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is going to keep happening, so what do we do? And it's hard.
And because there's not like a foolproof plan where you could be like, all right, we're gonna have no wars, and then there'll be someone like, I don't agree with that, and then ends up starting a war. It's
Bingo.
nothing that.
In the text, even as we do that, we struggle with these issues, and I mean, and maybe one of the first takeaways from have this is that don't necessarily listen to people that have the immediate, simple, and quick solutions for something. Like, hey, there's a conflict over here. We should do blank instantly. Okay, well, have we thought this through? Not saying that we will have perfect wisdom of what to do, but if you're just knee-jerk reaction to world crises, if we would have done more in Syria to begin with, would there be less refugees? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's the struggle of, are there places we should have gone in? Were there places we shouldn't have gone in? Are there places that other countries should have done more and we done less?
And it sucks too is if our country decides to do one thing, there's always going to be that other half that didn't agree with what we just did. Like with Vietnam, how then like the hippies and like all of them were just like, hey, why are we doing this? Like hugs, not drugs, or like that. It's that kind of stuff. And
it's hard. I mean, it's hard, and that's always the struggle. Is that not everybody's going to be happy with it. Not everybody's going to think it's easy. And it's even the struggle of, can I not be happy we're at war, but still care for the people fighting? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's always those interesting spots to be. I just, in some ways, World War II is always a great example. As World War II, you know what I mean? There's the genocide of Jewish people going on. I think most people are in agreement. There are still some subsets of the population. We shouldn't have gone to World War II. So be it. But that's one of the easier ones. I'm pretty pro World War II going in on that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I can't remember. I can't remember. It was. What was it? World War II? I think it was one where like the whole almost all of our country was like we need to help them.
Yeah.
And then everyone was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was World War II because that's when Victory Gardens were a thing.
Victory Gardens. Yeah.
Everyone was getting involved. Like almost all the nation was just helping us end the war. And then Vietnam happened, and then they're like, why are we fighting a war between a known country, helping shorthand a civil war minus that all of Russia was helping out the North.
Yeah. Well, and that's the struggle. I mean, because even after World War II, things got a lot murkier. You know what I mean? Excuse me. That's one of the struggles. Even as you look at history in some ways. Because even before Vietnam was Korea. And there were struggles around the Korean War. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't claim to be able to, Monday morning quarterback these things. That's always the struggle. Mm-hmm. Korea was a hard one too. I mean, even, the first Iraq war in some ways was an easier one. Mm-hmm. The second one, struggles around that, yeah. I mean, and even now, Afghanistan, there's the desire to get the troops out. But at what cost?
Yeah.
And and maybe that's, again, and I think we've circled it well, these are not simple. These are multi-variable equations with lives on the line. Lives if you do, lives if you don't.
Exactly.
And maybe one of the take-homes is that when you find yourself in the sticky wicket, you need to have grace for people. You also need to admit maybe your errors and learn from them, those sorts of things. But the hope then, maybe in the good news, that with God and a lot of these things, you have the birth pangs. Can good come out of these things? That's always the hope and the understanding. And if you look at numerous ones of these conflicts in some ways, some good has come out of these things. I mean, I think very much of, some good has come out of World War II. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was some good. There was some technological advances that came out of World War II. which were blessings to people. You know what I mean?
And it's a struggle with war too, because war creates so many jobs for everyone. Where it's like if you look at it from a statistic standpoint, you're like, yeah, more wars, more jobs, more money, and then you're like,
but
oh yeah, and then you realize you're like, it's not a really good thing.
So how do we take care of our anthropology, because we are what we are? What's the good? And I think that is often the question of what is the good that we come out of it? What is the blessings that can come out of it? Even as we take refugees, you know what I mean? Because we have, and we will. Mm-hmm. Numbers, again, how many? And I don't claim to know the answer to that, but we will. But hopefully the prayers are that, they will bring blessings and benefits. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is...
Well, with, was it... I think it was World War II with, like, the Chinese and Japanese internment camps that we had in America.
The Japanese, and there were some German ones, yeah.
And how there was basically, they're like, here's the materials, build your own town, you're living here till the end of World War II. Mm-hmm. And it was such, because before that, we stopped all of the people, immigrating in. And then they're like, well, you're only like a firstborn Chinese, citizen.
Yeah.
We're going to have to put you in a camp because you could be a spy. And, they're throwing all of these people in there. And it is just such, like, an inhumane thing, because over there they had concentration camps, which are basically fatal versions of internment camps.
Yeah. Yep. And so how does the good come out of that? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Is there good that can come out of that? And I think there can. I mean, that's the birth pangs, I think, analogy for those sorts of things is, we can have the good. And I was actually thinking about the more recent one. I think I heard a report about Germany's taking in numerous refugees. Mm-hmm. And there's the struggle. I mean, there's pushback. Not everybody's like, yeah, you're refugees. Some are. But if my memory serves, and if you're out there, I mean, Google it, people. I think it is. But around the general idea that they were having such a huge shortage of pharmacists in Germany, that they were having issues, you know what I mean, with getting medicine.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, for some reason, there were numerous refugees that had pharmacological degrees from, like, Assyria. You know what I mean? They're like, well, yeah, I'm a pharmacist. And they're like, shoot, would you like to work? We need your gift, skills, and ability. And they're like, yeah, I'd like to work. I've just been displaced from my country. I have no home. Yeah. I would love a job. You know what I mean? And so there was even that sense of, not even a handout, but there was in some ways that those hidden blessings.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing to look at, And, yeah. Because I've known, people that have fought in wars, people that have been radically against wars. Mm-hmm. I know hawks, I know doves, and it's always that struggle. But hopefully, what we can do as God's people is maybe not just see the good, but use an opportunity to get more good and to do good.
Yeah. Because
in situations like with refugees or wars or struggles, are there things that we can do to do the good? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like the victory gardens, even in World War II. World War II is a prime example of taking that hard situation and doing the good. Yeah. Neighbors taking care of neighbors, doing the gardens and that sort of thing.
Well, because they were turning like baseball fields and like all of that stuff into like victory gardens.
Yeah.
And that's when softball became super popular because all of the male athletes were all fighting off in the war. So they're like, well, all these ladies here, we like to play sports too.
Well, even Rosie the Riveter. I mean, there was a huge then understanding of what women could do.
Yeah.
And you want to look at some of even the growth in equality, there was the sense of, our men are going or dying. These ladies can do amazing things. And there's even a hope, I think, on some level that the positions that my wife and many of the women I know that are not just, many of the positions that they can hold, owe something to those women who did good in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Those are the birth pangs. It's worth it. Life is not easy. And I think that Mark and Text and those guys, heck, I mean, even the apostles had to work good in very bad situations. Man, we covered a lot of wild ground on that one.
Yeah, we did.
Hard text, hard topics. But again, I mean, that's why I think, it's good to talk about these things. And we live in a world where, becomes so polarized as opposed to saying, okay, it's not easy. Can we, not to beat the drum on this one, can we stumble around in some of these issues to see if there's a way forward? Because sometimes it's only by discussing and stumbling on some of these things you can find a way forward.
Well, that's what that's one of the things that I'm getting to, is that you learn from each childbirth what to do and not do. And it's kind of the World War II, we're just like, we used we used the painkillers. That was a pretty good idea. And then they're like, Vietnam War, like, another be like, I'm not going to try painkillers. And you're like, never again, like, because I haven't gave birth, but most women have that are, and so it's kind of, you learn these things, and then you thank God that you're not a woman, so you don't have to go
and that's maybe another great takeaway, is that if Christ compares all these things to birth pangs, birthing ain't easy.
Yeah.
Oh. So all the ladies out there, good on you. For those that have borne children in many and varied ways.
I'm sorry.
Any other topics du jour, stuff happening in the world? Because we were we were really integrated. We didn't even, break off. We covered, I think, a lot of weird ground today.
Yeah. Well, speaking of apocalypse, I've been doing some research into some Nordic mythology.
Ha! Okay, we're everywhere today.
Yeah, we're everywhere. You got to bring it full circle.
Okay.
And how, I can't remember the name of the serpent, but it was the equator. And
the Midgard serpent.
Yeah, and it was all of the champions and everywhere went to fight the serpent, even though they knew they were going to die, but they just didn't give up. Like, all the gods kept trying to fight it, and they kept dying, and it showed, like, the message of never giving up.
Because, you brought in Ragnarok.
Yeah, Ragnarok.
Ragnarok, the great final battle where Odin is eaten by the Midgard serpent, Thor gets destroyed by the Fenris wolf, Loki, and all this folks from Niflheim, or wherever roll on in. Oh yeah, where have you been reading about the Norse mythology?
Heavy metal music.
Louise, Nick.
Because
Louise.
Because you reminded me, my cousin was showing me some Nordic heavy metal bands.
Heavy metal bands.
And it was all about the mythology that was in them, and that was it was like a very intense song. And it was
a lot of Norwegians are Lutheran too?
That's pretty great.
I don't know how to reconcile the fact that Nordic heavy metal bands
It's pretty awesome.
That I think that comment at the end. Let's talk about Norse mythology. Let's do it. Fenris Wall.
Because Nords were such a very battle heavy race, and like those stories were just like, don't give up. Like if you're punching a wall, you better punch it as hard as you can. Like
the whole phrase. Did I say this to you? I think I said it at confirmation one time. You know why God made mountains? So you could climb them and punch the moon.
That's awesome.
I mean, that mentality. Like, let's go punch the moon. Yeah. Don't give up. That is a good one.
And I feel like that's the note that will end off this week's episode of Stumbling Towards the Eschaton. Just don't give up and do what you love doing.
Hey, and thanks for sticking with us with heavy topics. Heavy topics hopefully bring about heavy goodness.
And heavy metal. Keep on stumbling, viewers.
Have a good one.
See ya.